and we're from Curtis Mathis, and we're going to be talking about over the next 5 seminars everything you wanted to know about growing plants with LED lights. We're going to start out by just going over a few industry trends, and then we're going to dive right into it. One of the things that has been coming up that is holding back the industry is we have a lack of standardization of nomenclature. That's not anything we're going to get into today. We're seeing consumer pushback as states do go to recreational cannabis, and certainly here in Arizona, where I am, we've seen that where the commercial growers are coming out and basically it's very substandard compared to what they were buying off the black market. Speaking of which, one of the things that's also hindering the market is we leave the black market history of cannabis. There's still a lot of business practices that are frankly unsavory that have come along with it, and that's going to need to be fixed. As far as what's going on the grow side is, especially for the baby boomer generation, is the ever increasing race to produce the highest THC cannabis. And I think that you're going to start to see that there's going to be some pushback in that area. Certainly, when you go into the legislatures around the country, that's a big topic. And two things that are very exciting is the impending legislation in California that's going to mandate high efficiency LED lighting. And that means everybody that's been growing indoors in California is going to basically over the next 18 months going to have to replace all their lighting. And just today, New Jersey came out and said we can resume licensing for medical cannabis, and that's going to be a big thing. They're still talking about recreational, and hopefully they'll get over that goal line soon too. So now let's go ahead and get over. We're going to talk about LED lighting. I wanted to introduce our two experts, Bob Mannis and Zach Hildenbrand. So Bob, why don't you tell us about yourself, and then we'll get to Zach, and we're going to kick off from there.
Bob? Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, Ed. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Curtis Mathis Grow Lights. I've been in the lighting industry for 20 years. I've actually been building horticultural lighting for the last 15. That's it in a nutshell.
Hey, Zach, what's your background?
So I am a cancer biochemist by training. I've been working in unique fields in both the energy and agricultural sector now since 2011. I had the good fortune of meeting Bob in 2017. And, we've been working together on Curtis Mathis Grow Lights now, having a lot of fun, learning a lot about horticultural lighting and doing some very, very exciting experiments that are resulting in new forms of medicine in this new frontier of medicine, which is cannabis and hemp. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today.
Okay, well, Bob, we've had the sun for 4 billion years. Why should we be using LED lights now?
So you throw me a softball. Thank you. Well, LEDs give you an ability that high pressure sodium, metal halides, and several other high intensity discharge lighting technologies do not. They let you tailor light to any frequency, both that you can see and also those frequencies that you can't see, which are just as important because plants see a lot more than we do. So LEDs let you, and more LEDs are coming out. They let you either increase or attenuate lighting in very specific frequencies, which is the basis for a lot of our testing right now that Zach just alluded to.
Anything you can add in on that, Zach?
Yeah, so the common question that we get all the time is, why would you grow this indoors and endure the additional expense for all of this fancy LED lighting when you can just grow this stuff outdoors? And the truth of the matter is it's a combination of facts. Outdoor cultivation is a challenge. I mean, you're dealing with the elements versus controlled environmental agriculture, which is indoor. You can control the variables such as temperature, humidity. You're not as susceptible to pests. You're not as susceptible to extreme weather events, which are becoming more and more frequent these days. And as a result of these lighting technologies, the LED lights and our harvester in particular, you can really push the photon intensity, the photon density, while also emulating the sun and its spectrum to produce more flower material than you can outdoors, and more importantly, more efficacious flower material. So with respect to cannabis and hemp, the medicine for the most part is found in these extracellular glands outside of the plant material called the trichomes. They're these little glass bulbs. And so the higher density of the trichomes, obviously the higher concentration you're going to have of these various terpenes and cannabinoids. And so what we're finding is that with controlled environmental agriculture, with the right lighting and the right other environmental factors such as soil, water, microbial additives, that you can just push the equilibrium of how much plant material and how efficacious that plant material is to a much higher threshold than you can outdoors.
Wow, that is a lot to go over. And fortunately, we've got more seminars to talk about all that because that is a lot of material. Well, one of the things I want to ask is, I've been buying lights, for my house, and I bought HIDs and CFLs, and even LEDs. I mean, Bob, what's the difference between them?
Well, probably the primary difference from a consumer standpoint is power consumption, and LEDs. Also, LEDs are very consistent. And what I mean by that is if you buy a light bulb or a compact fluorescent, as you fire that up for the very first time, it starts to degrade, and it degrades significantly over the first, let's say, 100 hours of its use. Also, as it degrades, it changes its spectral diversity. It changes color, whereas LEDs are a solid state device, and they stay very specific frequency, specific power output, and many times for many, many years, and that's proven by laboratory testing.
Wow. Well, just as a side question, I mean, for somebody growing cannabis, how many hours do you need of actual having the light on to go from a seedling to actually getting a harvested bud?
You're going to make me grab my calculator, huh? So the as far as total light, are you asking how much total light do you need over a period of time?
Well, I'm looking more at it as like how many hours do you use? Because that, when you say that after 100 hours, which is less than a week of just having a light on, you're already degrading the efficiency of your bulbs.
Exactly. So just the flower phase of growth is somewhere a little bit over 1,000 hours of operation. About a third less than that that was the veg side. About a third less than that for the flower period for most strains of cannabis.
Now, I've read that for HID lights that you pretty much have to replace them at a max of 2,000 hours. Is that true?
Not necessarily. And although I don't like to plug the HID lighting, they are making some strides in that area, such as longevity, such as restrike times, which is another subject entirely. But HID lighting, they're getting better at the drop in efficacy and the change in color, and they're getting more lifespan. But that doesn't mean that growers don't like to swap out LED lamps or bulbs every second crop. So about every 4 months, you're going to be buying if you're using, let's say, a double-ended bulb, and I won't mention brands, you may pay $89 per lamp every 4 months.
So that's a significant expense, especially when you're comparing it to the longevity life cycle of LEDs.
Absolutely. It's a tremendous bonus to us when we're sitting down and developing a return on investment document. And
well, Zach, what have you seen as far as the advantages of using LED lights?
Well, I think the word sustainability has really come to the forefront, whether you're talking about the agricultural sector or other aspects of our society. In the cannabis industry, sustainability is at the forefront because of power consumption. For example, in California, you have folks that are concerned about how much electricity is going towards cannabis cultivation that perhaps could be going to other processes. And I mean, that's a state that's been fraught with rolling blackouts, as a function of some of the wildfires and whatnot. And so that's where some of these mandates come into place. to use more efficient technologies such as LEDs. And so some folks don't quite understand that, okay, well, now we're making this transition towards LEDs. Are we going to be able to produce the same quality of medicine? And the truth be told is LEDs with the right spectrum and the right photon density and penetration can actually produce much more efficacious material than you can under HPS lighting. And so it's really a combination of, you're killing two birds with one stone there, where you're doing better by the environment by having these more efficient lights while simultaneously producing better plants. And so it's from our perspective, we've just been going through that education process to show people that, hey, not only is this better for the environment, but you can also produce better medicine this way.
Well, with your lights, the Harvester, what have you observed as far as increases in cannabinoid concentrations and grams per watt? I'm using a technical term there. So
Sure, absolutely. So we just came back from Tulsa, which is a fantastic show last week. And I met with a gentleman there who said, I just produced 50 pounds out of 500 square feet with Gavita double-ended HPS. There's no way you're going to touch that. And so I did the back of the envelope math with him and said, okay, well, how many lights did you have in there? Well, I had 1,000 watts. Okay, so we got 21,000 watts of power. And then you basically take the flower material weight, divide that by the watts, and it came out to 1.05 grams per watt. And standing there was a client of ours, Mr. Zach Cohen, who him and Brittany Navarro operate Tegrity Gardens. And those folks are getting over 2 grams a watt, and they're getting higher cannabinoid and terpene concentrations. So it just goes to show you that it's very easy to kind of find one's confirmation bias when they feel comfortable with an existing technology. But if you go out and you ask around, really who is producing more material and more efficacious material, it's the LED people. It's the folks that have an understanding that, these LED lights are going to trigger a much more efficient metabolism. So I have to feed the plants more. And as a result, I'm going to get tighter buds. I'm going to get a much tighter internodal spacing, and I'm going to get greater trichome density. So it's been really rewarding to be on that front where, again, we've got a technology such as the Harvester that is better for the environment, it's better for your pocketbook, and simultaneously producing better
well, let's
medicine.
talk about that. I mean, how much better is it for your pocketbook? I mean, if I'm going to go out to all this effort, I'm hoping I'm going to be getting more money for all that. So do you?
So typically LEDs are more expensive than HPS technologies. Then when you account for the fact that you're going to have to replace bulbs on the HID lights or the ceramic metal halide lights, they're going to produce more heat, which you're going to have to treat with HVAC, which means more electrical cost. Depending on the size of the grow, I mean, we're finding that the return on investment for the LEDs can be as within 2 years. And then basically you're operating on a much leaner budget than you would be if you're having to pay for all this electrical cost. And to put it into perspective, I mean, we visited sites that are using Gavitas, and let's say I think one of them was 100,000 square feet. And I asked the gentleman, what are your electrical bills in this place? And he said it's basically like buying a base model Mustang and driving it into the wall every month. That's what we pay. So,
Not to correct you, but I do believe you said Corvette.
could
Corvette. Oh, wow.
have been Corvette, tomatoes. I don't know.
Magic on many levels.
I know, twice the cost. Yeah. So,
Well, one of the topics I want to transition to is I've been reading up, and there's a lot about full spectrum lighting that's in the press right now. So could you explain that, Bob, what that is and why it's important?
sure. Well, I try to keep it short. The visible spectrum of light is the magnetic spectrum is considered to be between 400 nanometers, which is blue, to 700 nanometers, which is red. We've since learned that there are frequencies far outside those that have effect on plants' growth and plants the outcome of the crop. Hold on, I got a problem here. Hold on. Okay. So full spectrum is the ability to produce light across the whole spectrum without any gaps in it. And if you go back to when LED grow lights first started coming out, you saw these red and these blue LEDs, and we call them blurple lights. And people
I've
swore
seen
by
that.
them. Yeah, they're horrible looking, but people swear by those, and or you swore by them then. Matter of fact, when I started to follow some of the prominent photobiologists in the industry and in the food crop industry, I realized that they weren't dealing in red and blue. They were dealing in full spectrum and doing studies on what kind of light plants actually do use. So that's why we went to full spectrum. Now, back then we were scoffed at, but the industry now uses full spectrum pretty much across the board. There are very few blurple lights left out there. And I just want to go and say that when the blurple lights were popular, a lot of marketers and advertisers, and I suspect that sometime we're going to get into marketing and advertising, what's wrong with that section of the industry, but use would tout this scientific study that showed that plants only need red and blue light. And when we did some research and started to go back, the actual documents they were using were written in 1909. And they were photocopied, and I thought, well, that's probably walking backwards. So we went out and we found some modern photobiologists, and we followed what they're doing, and that's where we are today.
Excellent. Well, Zach, one of the things I want to ask you is, I've been reading that your lights have green light. I mean, plants do not absorb green light. I mean, isn't that right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
I mean, plants don't absorb green light, so why would you need to put green light in your full spectrum lights?
Actually, they do. So we know, according to the McCree curve, which is essentially a dogma, Dr. Keith McCree established that plants utilize this range, which we call the McCree curve, between, well, it's a little bit beyond 400 to 700, but within this for their photosynthesis. And so, as Bob was kind of alluding to with these blurple lights, where it's like, well, as long as you cover your chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B absorption with the blue and the red, then you should be fine. Well, the truth of the matter is that all those other colors play a role.
I've got it.
Yeah.
I just want to add, as an example, I do believe it was in 2012. Chlorophyll F, it's an antenna pigment for chlorophyll A, was discovered, and it's outside the visible range to humans. And it's at 780 nanometers, so it's in near infrared, and it was found to have a profound effect on plants and bacteria as well. So, that just illustrates that there's a lot we don't know.
Yeah.
And those are also, for anybody listening, we're going to be diving into those in future seminars. So we will be coming back to those and doing an in-depth exploration of that. So, well, I mean, I guess the key question is, does anybody sell full spectrum lighting that you know of?
Everybody. I think it's pretty much the industry standard now, if you look around. And this is something we'll get into later, I'm sure, but the probably 90% of the lights you see on the internet for grow, especially cannabis grows, are actually produced by just a few companies and resold by many, many companies. But they're almost all full spectrum lights. Not exactly our spectrum, but they're trying.
Well, what sets the harvester apart from these other people claiming to be full spectrum?
So with respect to spectrum, I mean, there are some substantial and in some cases minute differences, but in general, compared to other LEDs, what you're going to find in our spectrum is a much more substantial spike in the blue range, which is going to help for the vegetative aspect of the cycle, and then a substantially greater red color spike there at the 660 nanometers, which is for flowering plants. And that's really where we found, I think, a majority of our success is attributed to that large supplemental red light, because we're seeing much greater trichome density, greater cannabinoid terpene expression, compared to other HPS or CMH, but we're really doing substantially better than other LED lights that don't have that supplemental red.
Anything to add, Bob?
Yeah, the difference between blue and red light, if anybody wants to go look at it, another wonderful photobiologist, Dr. David Gates, actually performed a study in which he quantified that it takes approximately 1 to 2 blue photons to process a CO2 molecule, and it takes 8 to 10 photons to process a red. To process a CO2 molecule in the red end of the spectrum. So yeah, that's why we put the additional red in, and also to implement the Emerson effect, which is a long description and story. So I won't go into it here.
Well, hopefully we'll get to that in a later seminar. So,
Absolutely.
that's goes through the topics that I'd laid out. So one of the things, do you guys have any questions for each other that we should know about?
Well, one thing that I really love working with Bob on is, when we go on work trips, we're in the car for hours and hours, we kind of just spitball about opportunities, particularly on the research and innovation front. And so one thing that we've kind of been kicking around here is looking at creating a light that we could accentuate anthocyanin production. So anthocyanins, these are a class of flavonoids found in cannabis, hemp, blueberries, any kind of fruit you can imagine. They give cannabis and hemp their really nice, beautiful purple color. You may have seen some plants like that. And for the most part, it's attributed to a drop in temperature. So when you're, for example, we have some great friends up in Oregon that do outdoor cultivation, and I've been out there during Croptober, and you can see over the course of the last couple of weeks, these plants turn this beautiful purple and blue color because of the drop in the morning temperatures. What we're also find is that there have been quite a bit of studies in other plants showing that you could use supplemental blue light to actually trigger anthocyanin production. So considering that these class of flavonoids are very, very powerful antioxidants, which has, physiological value, we're looking at creating a technology where maybe we could shine this in the last couple days or week of the grow, or maybe even shine this on freshly cut cannabis, or maybe even cured cannabis to accentuate anthocyanin production. So that's one of the many things that we're working on. And these conversations that Bob and I have start off as weird science, and then before you know it, we kind of go through the scientific method, say, well, no, that makes no sense, or no, you're crazy. But we ultimately come up with something that seems fairly plausible. So that's what really keeps me excited.
Wow, we've certainly come a long way from where my roommate was trying to grow pot in his locker back in college with a 60-watt bulb.
It worked though, didn't it?
Yeah, it actually did. So.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. No, it's been an evolution, and quite frankly, not much is known about cannabis and hemp right now because of all the restrictions that we've had here in the United States. We have participated in a number of leading studies looking at the characterization of unknown and molecules, doing untargeted analyses. And that's research that Curtis Mathis has been doing in collaboration with Zed Therapeutics and the University of Texas at El Paso, University of Texas at Arlington, our good friend, Dr. Kevin Shug. But to now look at the use of different lighting spectra, different lighting technologies to impart different phytochemical changes in different genetics. I mean, this is really, really exciting research. Ultimately, I think where this can go and where I'd love to see this field go is if for someone who has a particular illness, a particular condition, they don't need a certain strain named a certain name because the nomenclature is all over the map. They need a strain that contains certain constituents. And if we can find, the healthy balance between here's the genetic you would need, it needs to be grown under these lighting conditions to best accentuate those constituents that you're after, then that is tailored medicine. And that's the type of approach that the biopharmaceutical industry has been utilizing, using some of these kind of genomic techniques right? Trying to understand your human code and then what you're most susceptible with. We've seen a lot of startup companies trying to tailor a diet towards your genetic code. For example, I might be better off eating protein and fat, and maybe you're better off at metabolizing a high carbohydrate diet. Similar type experience can be had here in the new frontier of medicine, where we can figure out which constituents these folks need, whether it's for a neurological disorder, or maybe it's general pain, or maybe it's gastrointestinal abnormalities. And then we can prescribe a certain genetic that has been grown under certain conditions to give them the best output. Because I think ultimately what we see here is in order for this industry to be taken seriously on the same level playing field as current biopharmaceuticals, is you need to have people having favorable experiences. And when they don't know anything about this field and then they go into a dispensary and they don't have a favorable experience, like with edibles, they've never had cannabis before and they want something to help with their pain and anxiety maybe, and then they are prescribed 100 milligram chocolate bar that sends them to the moon. Never going to consider cannabis as a
The
legitimate
horse dose.
Yeah. So it needs to be highly tailored and specific. And so that's why guys like me with a traditional research background have gotten involved. That's why people like Bob, who's, an innovator and has an incredible amount of experience in horticultural lighting. That's why he's in this field, is because, we want to see people have better outcomes with this medicine.
Well, I mean, from my own standpoint, I'm a physician. I've been doing pain work for the last 35 years, and that's my biggest bugaboo with the whole medicinal cannabis movement. I'm not against it, but at the same time, I find that as a physician, very unsettling that, one, I can't prescribe it for you. I've got to go through this fiction that I come up with. You meet one of these criteria. Now, go off to the state, get your card, and then I can't intervene after that at all. So now you're going down to speak to your local 21-year-old bud tender bro, who, when you go in there, says, well, my grandma used it for this. Why don't you try that? No, yeah, let's go low and slow. I mean, that's like the mantra in the recreational industry, because they don't know what they're doing. I mean, that just, if you ever hear a physician ever use that, run, they don't know what they're doing. So,
okay, duly noted.
I'm writing this down.
But at the same time, when you come to see a physician and I prescribe a medicine, exactly like Zach was talking, I get to, you come back to me, you tell me how you responded, and we make alterations based on it. There's no ability with that. You're going back to your bud tender and hoping that, that the purple kush that they put you on, well, that didn't work so well. Let's try orange diesel. I'm just making up names now, but
so this is the type of protocol. For example, our friends in Oregon, Adam Jacques, Christian West, Oriah Love, Andy Grosella, Matthew Spurlock, all these guys have been utilizing this protocol where they have it dialed in to the milligram per kilogram dose of treating epileptic patients. And it's based on feedback, like, this worked. Okay, well, why don't we add a little bit of this? And I mean, they have proprietary formulas of 10 or 15 different cannabinoids where they can actually individualize things for their patients. And that's why people travel from all across the United States to go see those guys for their medicine. So that's the way it should be done. Unfortunately, it's the industry, when it's under the guise of medicinal cannabis, really it's just about revenue generation. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's nothing wrong with running a profitable business. But if we're going to start talking about medicine, that means that it requires a tailored approach where we're making data-driven decisions. And it also means that when we're at a medical cannabis conference, we probably don't need to see scantily clad girls draped over a Lamborghini. We probably need to be talking to more people with your, educational background.
You've never been to a medical conference, have you? So they're over syringes, not Lamborghinis. But that brings up a good point. I mean, you're talking about the entourage effect, and that's actually where I can turn around and point back the other way, that in Western medicine, it's really poo-pooed that, well, you're going to get this mixture, and because we only want to pull out the individual components and give them one by one. But if you actually look at what happens with real patients, let's say they're treating high blood pressure. Well, first they'll start out with a beta blocker, and then we'll start out with an ACE inhibitor. And so by the time you get everything done, you're on 5 different medicines, which is sort of the entourage effect, one medicine at a time.
With side effects, but
Yeah, lots of side effects. I mean, most of the drugs that you're taking or start treating the side effects of the original medication. Eventually, you start treating the side effects of the side effects, which is why you see elderly patients literally on 20 plus medications.
Yeah, so nothing speaks more to the value of the entourage effect when you find people that are enjoying full spectrum flower, which is going to have, a mixture of major cannabinoids, maybe CBD, THC, CBG, CBN, with some of the ancillary cannabinoids, CBC, CBDV, THCV, CBL, and the terpenes. They'll have a much more favorable experience with that than with something that has been distilled down to where you've only isolated THC. And that's not an accident. I mean, we know that there's a lot of synergistic effects between the various cannabinoids and the terpenes. And so that's also part of the educational experience here. I mean, our lights are definitely producing some of the highest potency flower that are out there on the market. But just because your flower doesn't hit 30% THC, maybe it's only 22% THC, doesn't mean it's not top shelf medicine, because some of those other medicinal elements in there are really, really valuable.
Well, on a historical basis, we certainly saw the same thing in over the last 150 years ago with opium. And it went through a lot of the same trajectory that, doctors would have elixirs of opium. And there was method to the madness, because the opium elixir has thousands of different compounds that are all active in the body. The problem is that to get the stuff that treats blood pressure or your pulse rate or your asthma, you're getting mainly morphine with that. So, you definitely had a lot of repeat business for it. So,
sure.
Because the morphine is addictive. Now, one of the things that I've learned as I've been in this, and especially it's fascinating to me as a pain doctor, is cannabinoid receptors are the most common receptor in the human body. And as compared to opioid receptors, which are concentrated primarily in the brain and some nervous tissue, cannabinoid receptors are literally everywhere. I mean, it's, it was, for me to learn, was just stunning to learn just how ubiquitous they are.
So why would our human bodies, over millions of years of evolution, put forth the resources to build out an elaborate endocannabinoid system with receptors in certain areas if they weren't of value, right?
Exactly.
Really quite amazing. I mean, we've heard these stories, for example, of folks that have these mutations in their endocannabinoid receptors, and they basically, as a result, don't perceive pain the same way as we do. Now, okay.
No, they don't perceive pain at all. I mean, I know the exact cases you're talking about.
Which is a double-edged sword, right? Because pain is a way for us to basically gauge danger. And while it's great that I would never feel pain, if I can never really sense that I'm in danger, and I'm cooking a stir fry for my family and my hand is literally in the wok and I can't tell the difference, well, I might not have that hand for very long, have that proper pain response. So, but yeah, the science is fascinating, and really we're just scratching.
Exactly. We're just scratching the surface. And one of the things that's fascinating and also saddening is almost everything I've learned in 35 years of experience about pain and addiction is probably wrong. Some of the most recent studies that have been done looked at the brain and with PET scans and what parts of the brain light up when you're in pain. And, the old model was basically a relay model that it was only the one part of the brain that would respond to pain. And it turns out that is not true at all. When you look at a person that's put in acute pain, there's 35 separate areas of the brain that light up. And the more fascinating thing is that when you take somebody that has chronic pain, there's 27 areas of the brain that light up, and they are different from the 35 areas for acute pain.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, it's fascinating. And even more fascinating thing is when you put in tracers for for lighting up opioid receptors and do that in acute model, it does go to the one area that you think, and pretty much none of the other 35 areas. But in the chronic pain, it doesn't go, it goes to the same area, but that doesn't light up. And when you go to look at cannabinoid receptors and light those up, you get all 35 areas of the brain light up with cannabinoid receptors.
Yeah, so a much more well-rounded experience, obviously. I mean, just from common sense, that seems like it's a more favorable experience for that particular patient. So,
well, I mean, it also fits in with the anecdotal evidence, and also one of the bugaboos, as we try to integrate medical cannabis into recreational cannabis, that people have been weaned themselves off of opiates by using cannabis. And, I've heard that again and again and again. And that's one of the reasons I don't poo-poo anecdotal evidence. It's not proof, but it definitely does give you a roadmap of where to go look as we do scientific inquiry.
Well, it's important. I mean, anecdotal evidence has actually helped guide the development of our lights over the years. I mean, we get a lot of really positive feedback, but we also do get some constructive feedback as well. And we integrate that into the development of our products. So, yeah, it's an evolution, and I'm really excited to see where horticultural lighting will be in 5 to 10 years. I think cannabis will be fully legalized. I think it will be much more widely studied at the university level. Most certainly will be widely studied in the private sector. I think they're going to put billions of dollars behind this.
I agree.
Really, I mean, the first question that often people ask is like, well, how far can we push this plant with genetic modulation? Some of these new, like CRISPR, for example, these type of gene editing technologies. And that's all great. Well, it's all well and good, but quite frankly, there's so much to learn about how the environmental factors can impact this plant and its expression of phytoconstituents. And so that's what we're really excited about on a day-to-day basis, to be on that forefront of creating those technologies and making those discoveries as to what's being created.
Well, that's certainly exciting. And we're going to be addressing this in great depth at one of our later lectures. We're going to be bringing in a couple of guests to talk with us. Anything else on your minds, gentlemen, that we need to hear about?
Bob?
No, I'm sitting here soaking up everything that you guys have said, and I feel a little bit out of my element. You mentioned weird science, and I just want to go ahead and announce that I'm the weird part, and Zach is the science part. We wouldn't have gotten this far. I just can't see that I would have gotten this far if it wasn't for Zach and what he's brought to the table, and
we're a great team,
and of course Ed as well, and I'm just proud to be here with you guys.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, I've learned more about lighting and chlorophyll and how plants actually grow in the last 2 months than the rest of my life combined. And with my engineering background, it's fascinating to see exactly. I mean, we're literally re-engineering a plant here, which is, to me, fascinating. I just want to address one thing as we get ready to close. We're going to be doing our next event on March 5th at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's still, or is it daylight? I'm not even sure right now. And the recording for this event will be up on YouTube. We'll be doing some editing, adding in some graphs and charts and things like that. So, and again, I want to emphasize, if you've got questions, please send them to info@curtismathis.com. And if you gentlemen don't have anything else, I think we'll wrap this up. I think we had a successful first go.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Ed, really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun, and always love talking science and plants.
Okay, gentlemen, we'll see you March 5th.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Take care.